Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, the snow has melted. The basketball season is wrapping up. That can only mean one thing. You and I planning football travel. It is already football travel season. I can't wait. So exciting.
Yes, you are correct. I was just thinking a little bit ago, like should book the Minnesota hotel. Let's go ahead and get that booked as close to the stadium as possible, as long as because right now maybe there are rooms that are available, which is usually not the case for Big Ten travel near any kind of stadium that will be hosting a game that weekend. So yeah, already excited for the Nebraska trip as well. Looking forward to Rutgers. Yeah.
I mean, we do get to drive all the way across Pennsylvania, so there's a lot to like there.
Do you think it's changed since the last time?
I think a lot of things have happened. They're always doing construction on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and yet somehow nothing ever changes. It's like the land that time forgot. It's fantastic.
The number of deer changes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're on the left side dead, other times they're on the right side dead, and so it's great. There's so much to see in Pennsylvania, but I do like the turnpike stops. Like, oh, this one has a Hardee's and like a Jolly Roger. It's like, what more could you want? And a gas station.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you hit the jackpot and it's a Sparrow. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Other times, not so much, and it's just like, here's your Burger King, and then the Taco Bell's not open.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, the Taco Bell is never open. That is the one standard thing that never changes on the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
But that's, we could talk about that. We'll start previewing road trip rest stops. That's a June thing. That's a June topic, not March topic, where we're going to continue our positional previews. We're going to look at receivers and tight ends as we continue on, heading 2 weeks away from the start of spring, which we assume will be spring football, which we assume will be like Monday, March 15th ish. Haven't really got a hard and fast date from Ohio State. But Ryan Day did say middle of March, and as far as I know, that's about as middle as you can get, like 15th and a half. Like, so maybe Monday afternoon would be a good time, like 6 p.m. Monday.
Yeah, perfect. No, but noon is traditionally viewed as midday. But that's just math and tradition and history and math.
Even during a leap year.
It's not a leap year.
Oh, then I withdraw the question. So Tom, before we get into football, let's talk about the Ohio State basketball team. We won't need to talk too much about it because they're losing right now. We don't really spend a lot of time on teams that are losing. That's why we only did one post-game show of the Alabama game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
So Ohio State has lost 3 in a row. They did not look like themselves at home against Iowa. That was, I think, evident pretty early on. And you wonder, like, what's the problem? What's wrong? And to me, they just weren't. I think they needed a break. Like, they had the last 2 losses, which were tough losses, close losses, I think had taken their toll. And I'm not sure how they were going to come out and even – I think the game was lost even before it was played. Just you only score 57 points. I think that was 57 against an Iowa team that doesn't play defense. Yeah, Kyle Young is hurt and still trying to play, coming back from his concussion. Luka Garza goes crazy. But it was just, I think the previous 2 losses caught up with them, and they had 2 games against opponents they could have beaten, they didn't, and then it just compounds, and now they have to stop everything. They have to put all the brakes on and regroup for Illinois. But where are you? With that Iowa loss? I just think it was 2 losses before then that all piled up, and also Iowa is pretty good. Ohio State actually did a decent job defensively, but there was just no offense for them.
It just looked like, you're going to have one of those days every once in a while where, as you said, Iowa is really not a good defense, and they had open shots in the first half, and they just weren't going down. And, if this team is missing open threes, I think they shot 20% in the first half from 3, then you're going to be down 16 points late in the first half. That is what that looks like. And then the second half, they came out like just a house of fire and got it down to, I believe, 2 at one point, and then couldn't hang on to the ball. And then they couldn't hit shots. And just like the last 10 minutes of the game, I think they made one bucket from the field in the last 10 minutes of the game. And it was just like, yeah, that just looks like a team whose legs have kind of gone and they're just mentally and physically tired. And, I think earlier in the week we saw like, yeah, Kyle Young's a pretty important part of this team because they don't look quite right without him out there. So I think this is a perfectly great time for them to have, what do they have, 6 days off? And then they go, Sunday to Saturday, I think. Take a week off, rest up a little bit, get everyone a little more healthy. And then, here's the nice thing about playing the Big Ten. The bad thing is if you have an off night, you're going to lose because you're playing, basically half the league is in the top 10, it seems like. So I think Ohio State is one of 4 teams in the top 7. That's pretty good. So, you're playing Iowa, you're playing Illinois, you're playing Michigan. Like if you're not right on the top of your game, you're going to lose. And sometimes you can even be pretty close to the top of your game and still lose because you're playing some of the best teams in the country. They get another crack at one of those teams over the weekend. They play Illinois on Saturday. Win that game, win a couple games in the Big Ten tournament, just get to the Big Ten tournament final, and you're probably just about a lock for a 1 seed. I think they have fallen off the 1 line in a lot of those tournament projections right now, but you have so many opportunities to build your resume playing so many good teams. If you beat Illinois and then you beat, say, Wisconsin in your first tournament game, and then you beat Illinois again or someone like that, Iowa in your second tournament game, like, yep, that's two top 10 wins and another maybe top 25-ish win. And that's a pretty good bolstering to what is already a pretty strong tournament resume. So all is not lost. They may just need a couple days off to kind of rest and regroup and get things back together again.
Yeah, I don't think all is lost. But what has maybe been lost is their shot for the double bye. Mm-hmm. And it looks like they will probably have to play Thursday instead of Friday unless they get some help from either Purdue or Iowa. I think where Purdue would have to lose both of their remaining 2 games, and they are favored to win both. Iowa, I think, would need to lose one of their remaining 2, and I think they have they're both home. I forget who the first opponent is. They're beatable. The second opponent is Wisconsin, so maybe. Mm-hmm. And of course, Ohio State would have to beat Iowa, and then so there's that. Like they would need to be tied with Iowa, and then they would have the tiebreaker advantage of having beaten Illinois, and Iowa hasn't. They would have Purdue has a tiebreaker of Ohio State based on sweeping Ohio State. So you need Purdue to lose twice or Iowa to lose once, and it's going to be a tall order for either of those things to happen. So that's where Ohio State looks to be at the moment. So that's basketball talk, Tom. Let's move to football recruiting, specifically Michigan football recruiting, landing 5-star cornerback Will Johnson, a Michigan legacy from the state of Michigan. Like a big 6'2", 6'3" corner, the cornerstone of the future of Wolverine football, perhaps. Was looking like maybe an Ohio State lean until Jim Harbaugh got rid of his entire coaching staff and brought some new blood in, which was the exact right move in terms of at least the new blood. We'll find out if they can coach. We don't, that's still up in the air. I'm sure they're just fine and will develop very well. But it was certainly a big win for Michigan, one of Jim Harbaugh's best wins so far. But the question remains, can you keep him? And that they're going to be asking that about any of their top commits this year, because I could see, the young coaching staff they have firing a bunch of people up and getting some recruits to commit and being all in. But as you're expecting, what, 7-5? Is that where you are? 7-5, 8-4?
Yeah, I had 7-5 on our bold predictions episode of the Morning Scoop last week. So yeah,
is that 8-4 sounds like, oh, that's okay. 7-5 is like, oh, you got a problem there. But maybe it's just a matter of if Jim Harbaugh returns or if he doesn't. So I don't think Ohio State is out of the woods with Will Johnson just yet. I certainly don't think they should stop recruiting him at this point.
No, and I almost certainly they will not stop recruiting him. There's no real reason to. I mean, Kerry Combs has a great track record both with recruiting and developing corners, and also in the state of Michigan with pulling pretty talented players out of there. So I don't think there's any chance that they go, oh well, he's committed. I guess we have to respect that. This is not the whatever 2006 gentleman's agreement or whatever it was in the Big Ten that we shan't recruit another school's committed prospects. Like, okay, all right, congratulations. And then the wheel was discovered, and now there's recruiting, and it's for real. So yeah, I think that this is one of these things where, as you said, Ohio State was, based on everything our recruiting guys are hearing, like Ohio State was in the driver's seat to a certain degree, coming out of a strong visit a few months ago, and then it just didn't quite. He never committed, and then because he never committed, it gave Michigan an opportunity. I mean, the sense I think is that like he was looking for Michigan to give him a reason to commit to Michigan, because if your dad played football for Michigan, I'm sure it's kind of a leap to go play for Ohio State. Not that it hasn't happened, but it's kind of a leap. And, Michigan did just enough to give him a reason to not commit to Ohio State, which, this is the time of year when Michigan football looks its best. And then camp starts, and then, the quarterback is about to win the Heisman Trophy, and then they lose 4 games. They don't have defensive tackles. The quarterbacks get lit on fire, and the quarterbacks fall apart, and then they have to pull someone in from the transfer portal, and the cycle starts anew again, because then it's February and March, and things are looking extremely, extremely promising. So, I would not read. I would not. Completely cross his name off your list of potential Ohio State targets for this fall, because, if Michigan does go 7-5, and I think if you look at their schedule, there's a decent possibility they do. Can Michigan really keep him? Like, at some point, you have to run out of excuses. Like, oh well, I mean, you can't fire him off of 2020. I mean, it was a pandemic year. Which, okay, yes, that's fine, that's good. You can't fire him off 2019 because yes, they lost by 4 touchdowns at home to Ohio State, but that's different. I mean, that was that's going to happen once. Okay, but you can't fire them off the year before that when they gave up 62 points to Ohio State, because they're good the rest of the year. And then, this year it's like, oh, well, they were young. They had to break in a new quarterback. It's like, you are never going to have a perfect scenario. So if you're waiting for the perfect scenario year for him to fail to then fire him, like, I mean, okay, he'll be the coach there forever, and that's fine. But, I mean, that's cool. That's cool if that's what you're into. I'm not here to kink shame, but if you were into Gator Bowls, like, cool, man. Like, that's, you do you.
Nothing wrong with a good Gator Bowl, Tom. I think everybody knows that.
Woody Hayes might disagree, but
yeah, that's true. If Will Johnson does sign with Michigan and stay a 5-star, he'll be just the third 5-star corner to sign at Michigan since the internet era began in 2002 of the rivals era. So that's something. Ohio State, if Jaheim Singletary stays a 5-star and they sign him, I believe that'll be 8 for Ohio State in that same span. It will be interesting to see. Ohio State could be losing. Say Cameron Brown ends up starting opposite Sevyn Banks. Those 2 guys will be seniors, and there'll be 2 openings. And Ohio State producing way more NFL corners than Michigan. Maybe Will Johnson starts to look around. But also, I'm sure it's just as easy or quicker to see the field at Michigan right now in the secondary than it is Ohio State. I mean, look at the impact Daxton Hill has had as a true freshman. And so that, given what Michigan has recruited at corner of late, you would think that a 5-star top, 15 type of player coming in is going to have a pretty good shot to at least be one of your top 3 corners right away.
You would think so, but here's the problem. Like, if you go through this year and things are not spectacular in the defensive backfield, okay, then that's 2021. He's been at Michigan. This will be his 7th season now. So, okay, then it's your 7th season, and well, things are still not fixed in the defensive backfield. But then in our 8th year, we're going to start a true freshman at corner, and that always goes great. Like, I mean, go through every Ohio State true freshman corner and find me the guy that was like a full year starter as a true freshman. Like, I don't know that you can really do it. A lot of guys, it's like the first year, maybe by the end of the year, you're okay. And you're like maybe kind of playable. And your second year, it's like, okay, now it's like pretty playable, pretty good for the most part. And then your third year, like it's a very hard place to be making immediate impact. And I think that's one of the reasons, Ohio State's bringing in a couple very, very talented corners this year, J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock. I mean, we haven't done our defensive backfield preview yet, but I don't want to spoil anything. But I am not expecting either of those guys to make a material difference, at least for the first half to 2/3 of this season, because it's a hard place to get on the field. So if you're relying on a true freshman corner in year 8, that's probably not going to be good. But it's okay because it's a true freshman corner, so that you can't expect that. You got to wait till year 9, and then he's only a second-year player, so you really got. And then,
right.
Look, if you can't give the man a decade to fix the program and get them to, what's
Let
your
him
rush,
get his
friend?
players in.
Exactly. What's your rush?
Yeah, that's true. I wrote about this for Michigan on Monday, and you're asking about the true freshman. I think Malcolm Jenkins is the last true freshman to be considered a starting cornerback, because he didn't start until the 3rd game of 2005, but he did that at nickelback. And then, because it was Tyler Everett the first 5 games, and then Jenkins starts at corner against Michigan State. I even had to go through the YouTube. Good luck trying to find some good quality 2005 Michigan State, Ohio State stuff. And Everett was playing nickelback. So Jenkins started those 4 games, and then
I got to stop you. I got to stop you right there. Was 2005 the blocked field goal right before halftime game? Yes.
So there's highlights of that.
The video is posted to YouTube, and the coaches are screwing it up. The best the only good halftime interview in the history of TV.
I believe Ohio State was losing 17-7 at that point, and they were turning the ball over, and it was just really gross. And then blocked the kick, and Ashton Yebote takes it back for a touchdown. As Michigan State, for some reason, I think they're out of timeouts, and they're just trying to get a kick, get that kickoff in the final seconds. And it's just a complete madhouse because I was, as I said, I was watching it. But so Jenkins started the middle 4, at game 6, started 4 games. Then he was out for 2, and then started in the bowl game at corner. So he was really the last, I believe, true freshman corner starting. But like you said, it took, it wasn't until the midway season when he was doing that. And that's with a secondary maybe not as deep as what Ohio State has been accustomed to over the more recent times. So I think J.K. Johnson or even Jordan Hancock may end up getting starts at some point this season. With them enrolling in June, I don't see that happening in September or certainly not September.
Right, not in September, and then if and when they do start in November, they're going to give up some passes against them because it is a very difficult place to get on the field. And as you were a freshman, there are an awful lot of very, 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 very talented Ohio State cornerbacks who have gone on to be first-round NFL draft picks who looked terrible the first couple times they were out on the field. I mean, go through. I mean, I don't know. Find the date of the 2014 Ohio State Michigan State game, and name search Marshawn Lattimore. And friends, he was not being projected as a first-round NFL draft pick on Twitter.com on that day.
Gary Conley.
Was it Gary and Conley?
Yeah.
Okay, Gary and Conley. Okay, sorry. There was a Marshawn Lattimore game too. I remember.
Yes, in 2015 as a nickelback, he had some issues.
Yeah, I was confusing my. And you know why you can confuse them? Because they all have them. Because it is a very difficult place to get on the field and be a really good, effective player early on. I mean, I don't know if you go back and watch Charles Woodson as a true freshman. Like, what is Charles? I mean, I think. Was the one-handed interception against Michigan State, was that his freshman year?
I think so.
Or was that, yeah, I mean, but that's literally all I remember of Charles Woodson in his freshman year. And, that was not a great Michigan team. And that is also arguably one of the greatest cornerbacks in college football history. So that's probably also not a real fair bar to have. So yes, if Will Johnson is Charles Woodson, part 2, then maybe he could potentially not be terrible as a true freshman. It's just, and that's not a reflection on Will Johnson, just as it's not a reflection on Jordan Hancock, just as it's not a reflection on J.K. Johnson or anyone else. It's a very difficult position to get on the field very early, and it is really unfair to expect much of anything. And whatever you see, please don't write them off as freshmen, because here's the thing about cornerbacks. They do tend to get better as their careers go along.
Well, and the 2 previous Michigan 5-star cornerbacks, Jabril Peppers and Donovan Warren, Peppers tried corner, but was not very good at it, and eventually had to then tried safety, was not very good there, then was moved to linebacker. Donovan Warren was a decent player, and then turned pro after his junior year and went undrafted. So don't don't do that, kids. Stay. Make sure you stay as long as you have to increase your NFL potential.
They do let you get NFL draft grades where they will tell you kind of where they think you're going to be picked. And if they say something other than first round or second round or third round, like, consider not leaving, because that's I mean, and it's not, that is, Ohio State has had guys do that as well. And that's a real, I think I did a what if show with Kirk Barton on the Morning Scoop on Tuesday. And, there are a few what ifs, like, boy, if that guy had just come back for one more year, another year of Jalen Marshall probably would have looked pretty interesting for Ohio State, and probably also done some good things for his draft stock, would be my guess. So, yeah, there are cautionary tales all over college football that you only get one chance to do it. So, don't rush it unless there's some real, guys can have personal stuff going on or family stuff going on where they have to do it, and that's obviously a totally different situation. But if you don't have to leave, you only get one crack at it. So make sure you're timing it correctly.
Now let's speaking of leaving, let's talk about a new Michigan quarterback, Alan Bowman, transferring from Texas Tech. Started. You can call him a 3-year starter in that he has started portions of all three of the 3 previous seasons at Texas Tech. One year I did select him in a fantasy football draft, thinking he would be the guy, and he wasn't until he wasn't. And that's kind of his history. Tons of passing yards and experience and all of that. And I know people are like, well, he's just coming in to provide experience. And yes, that is why he is there. You want another body. They have 3 scholarship guys without him, although really they have Cade McNamara and J.J. McCarthy, because as we've said many times here, Dan Villari, while on scholarship, is certainly not the level that you would expect a Michigan quarterback to be. Not that we even have this high pedestal of Michigan quarterbacks right now, but so Alan Bowman gives them another legitimate FBS Power 5 guy. My thinking is that knowing how the Michigan quarterbacks deteriorate throughout the season, I think Alabama is going to start a game for them. At least one. I think he's going to end up starting for them, Tom, at some point. My over-under for you on starts for Alan Bowman, 0.5.
I'd take the over there, because I think you're going to have I'm sure they don't want to throw J.J. McCarthy into the deep end of the pool at the very start of the season. So then it's probably Cade McNamara or J.J. or Alan Bowman. And I think there's a pretty good chance that they're going to have Bowman go at some point. He's someone, and let's just get this out there right now. At some point, there is a fantastic, if you're familiar with the Solid Verbal podcast, a National College Football podcast, they have for years called him British comedy legend Alan Bowman, because he sounds like someone that would have appeared on a 1970s BBC special or something. So at some point, I will just inadvertently slip and call him British comedy legend Alan Bowman. So that is my upfront credit, because that's a great nickname. He's just kind of like there. He was really explosive his freshman year. That was when Cliff Kingsbury was still there. So they're running a very different offense than what Michigan runs. And, he completed almost 70% of his passes, 17 touchdowns, 7 picks, not 8.1 yards per attempt. It's like, all right. I mean, this is someone who's really on his way to a pretty big career. And then Cliff Kingsbury gets fired, and he goes into a much more Michigan-like offense. I think he hit his sophomore year. I think he had like a deflated lung or a punctured lung kind of thing, or, some kind of like really gruesome internal injury. Only played 3 games, played 8 games last year, 64% completion, 1,600 yards, 6.9 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns, 7 picks. And, it's like, it's fine, but that's just like, that's real pedestrian. And, he is not going into a Cliff Kingsbury air raid offense. He's going into a much more like Matt Wells, who's the head coach there now at Texas Tech, much more like, along those lines where it'll be fine. He's not going to probably win you a bunch of games. If he doesn't lose you a bunch of games, like, that's fine. He's probably, on the, How do you want to score the grading scale for Michigan transfer quarterbacks? John O'Korn to
Jake Rudock.
Jake Rudock, and then Wilton Spate's like kind of in the middle there. He's like probably a Wilton Spate, maybe. It's like fine. And it's useful depth. It is useful depth. If he is your quarterback, you're not beating Ohio State. Like the way that Michigan beats Ohio State this year is probably if JJ McCarthy just completely explodes and is every bit as wonderful as his recruiting rankings would suggest he is, and he really gets up to speed very quickly, then sure, maybe. But, even then it's like, okay, well, Ohio State has basically that same kind of caliber recruit who's a year older, has already been in the offense for a year more, is getting coached by a guy who has a pretty good reputation and a track record of developing quarterbacks, as opposed to, the Michigan track record. It's a record of tracks. It's not great. So, if Alan Bowman, I think Alan Bowman is going to start at least a game or two for Michigan this fall. If one of those is the Ohio State game, that is probably not good news for Michigan.
So if this range of transfer quarterbacks, where for me it's Jake Rudock is at the top, or at the far at the pinnacle, and then you have John O'Korn at the bottom, and then right in the middle is Shea Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
Like Alan Bowman, to me, I think he would have been a good get for Ohio State to help that depth. I would probably put him between Patterson and O'Korn, maybe more O'Korn than Patterson as we narrow this down. Where this is how I see the season go, Tom. Cade McNamara wins the job, struggles after 3 games or so. There's a lot of pressure to put JJ McCarthy in, so they do that. Plays a couple games, gets hurt, because this is how things go. Like Wilton Spate gets hurt, so JJ McCarthy gets hurt, and then boom. Well, we can't go back to McNamara, and it's like, well, let's go back to Ball. Let's try Bowman, even though they should go back to McNamara because you want to keep him at Michigan. But instead, by going, you know what, let's just go with Bowman because we're fighting for our jobs now. So then it comes Alan Bowman starts. Cade McNamara, meanwhile, say it's by this point, November 3rd, he jumps in the portal because like, well, you're not even going to give me a chance. And I know JJ McCarthy's already taken my job. So Alan Bowman comes in and, leads them to their 7-5 or whatever. And now then Michigan is again left with just JJ McCarthy and Dan Villari after the 2021 season. And so maybe by bringing Bowman in, it's a bad thing.
It's, if they have to play him, if he's starting, I think that's a bad thing. If he's just a depth, added depth, like, when Ohio State brought in Gunnar Hoke, I don't think anyone was anticipating that Gunnar Hoke was going to be, winning the starting job over Justin Fields. But you want to have a veteran guy like that in the room, break glass in case of emergency kind of guy. Ryan Day has talked about wanting to have 400 quarterbacks in that room. I'm sure Harbaugh is the same way. So if he's just there to be depth, like, great. That's a perfectly fantastic addition. It's smart to have depth. Absolutely do it. If they're relying on him, like, that's not great. And I think my assumption would be that they will tell, they probably told him you are coming in with a chance to compete for the starting job. But in their heart of hearts, I can't imagine they're really thinking they're going to give it to him. Because there's all sorts of internal political dynamics in a quarterback room that you have to consider. And with as many guys going into the transfer portal as there are these days, you really can't risk alienating any of your guys. But also, this is a make or break year for them. If they go 7-5, they may all be out on the street. And so, I think there's a decent case to be made that the worst possible case scenario for Michigan is Alan Bowman comes out and is clearly the best quarterback in fall camp, and they have to start him. And then it's like, oh boy, that's a real problem for them, because you've got some short-term concerns there with what does that say about the other quarterbacks, and you got some long-term concerns about there, which is what does that say about the likelihood the other guys stick around.
But Tom, I go back to my often used theory about quarterbacks and Jim Harbaugh. The longer they're around Jim Harbaugh, the worse they get. The guy who has been around him the least amount of time will be Alan Bowman, because even J.J. McCarthy is there now. Dave McNamara has been around him for a year. Alan Bowman may not even show up until the spring or June or whatever. He's going to be their best option because he has not yet been tainted by the whispering of Jim Harbaugh. So just keep an eye on that. So you said over on the 0.5 starts for Bowman, did you?
I said over. I think there's just a decent possibility they, even if they don't want to, that they're forced to go to him at some point.
Okay, so my over-under on number of Michigan quarterbacks who start at least one game this year then is 2.5.
I think there's a decent possibility you're over there. I think there's a real decent possibility you're over there because, I have not done a real deep dive on them, but my impression is that their offensive line is probably not going to be super fantastic. So you have you have the concern about injury there. And, as you get into desperation mode for that team, you may do some shuffling at that point. And, and then if things are kind of bleak halfway through the season, maybe the smart move is to put the freshman in and go, yes, well, we certainly didn't expect to win this year. We're obviously planning for the future. And so you can't, so year 8 certainly cannot be held against us. We're just getting our players into the program. And so, yeah, I think I might take the over on 2.5, which is like, there are not that many programs that start 3 quarterbacks in a year, but this could be a year that happens for Michigan.
Well, and we've seen it how many times where the starter starts fine, and then at Michigan specifically, the starter starts fine, then has diminishing returns, and then the backup comes in and looks good for like 2 quarters, and they're like, oh, well, here's our new starting quarterback, and then he looks good for maybe the next 2 quarters of his first start, and then continues down from there. And we've seen it seemingly maybe every year with a 2-year break where Shea Patterson, there wasn't anybody good enough to maybe replace Shea Patterson.
Yeah, there was someone who faked a tweet of a Michigan reporter person who they faked the tweet where it was just basically like, oh man, this guy is looking like a legit Heisman contender, and it was just a different quarterback every year going back. And again, this was not real, but it was just kind of like you also kind of like the Michigan September Heisman quarterback thing, like it has been a meme for more than a decade for a reason, because it's like, well, yes, Tate Fournier is here to save the program. Denard Robinson is here to save the program. Devin Gardner is here to save the program. Wilton Spate is here to save the program. And I think I said earlier he was a transfer. He only seemed like a transfer. He transferred to UCLA later. Yeah. And after Wilton Spate,
Brandon Peters was seen as the guy.
Brandon Peters.
Brandon Peters.
Brandon Peters. Like there was a game or two where it was like, oh man, it is the Brandon Peters era, and then all of a sudden 2 weeks later it was the Shea Patterson era, and then it was, there have been a lot of eras. Probably a lot of unlicensed, T-shirt merchandise has been sold up there. Heralding the arrival of the new era, and the shoes of the QB force remain unfilled, sadly.
That's why I'm going to have a new shirt, like clothing line put out, the McNamara.
Oh, smart. That's way, good stuff.
I don't have to give credit to the guy for the name because I'll just spell it differently, but everybody will know. And somehow I'll try to use the block M with the Mara part. McNamara. Now I may get sued for the block M.
And also the window to sell that shirt is going to be very narrow. It's going to be about halftime of the Rutgers game until like the end of the first quarter of the next week. But those things are going to sell like hotcakes. Well,
screen printing technology has gotten so good over the years that you can get things out quickly. But yeah, it's going to be a niche, and it's going to be like a pop-up restaurant. People love those. McNamara. And then maybe I'll throw some like some Korean food, like it's a pop-up fusion type of place.
Yeah, Korean T-shirt fusion restaurant. I love it.
Thank you. Right in the middle of Ann Arbor, or at least campus. Although, is there any other part of Ann Arbor that isn't campus? I don't know.
I think there's like really expensive real estate around there, but yeah.
Well, I'm not going to pop up a restaurant / T-shirt store there.
Do it in the Pioneer High School parking lot.
Perfect. So that's what's going on with Michigan right now. Endlessly fascinating. We'll see how they go. Alan Bowman, probably your starter against Ohio State in November for Senior Day at Michigan.
Boy, that's going to be a scene.
So, Tom, let's move to our spring positional previews, talking Ohio State receivers and tight ends. Before we get to this being the year of the tight end, let's talk about receivers because we don't want to overlook the receivers before we start talking about the tight ends. The Buckeyes return everybody, although I will say Elijah Gardner is no longer in the OSU student database, like in the People Finder. We didn't see him at all last year. Jalen Harris didn't play at all last year. Probably still up in the air with a similar situation. So that only leaves them, Tom, 10 guys. So that's not very many for just 3 spots.
Yes, but how many of them are like top 50 players nationally in the recruiting class?
Like 10 guys, Tom. So, or at least top 100 players. But, and the thing is, they returned their entire, depth chart from last year in terms of the 2 deep and the 3 deep. I'm wondering, do you foresee any changes to like who is at X, who is like, do you think is Jameson Williams back at X again, or do they move him to Z behind Olave? And is there more of a rotation, or do you think things stay the same with just the top 6 guys we're talking about from last year with Olave and Fleming at the Z, Wilson and Jackson Smith-Njigba at the H, and Jameson Williams and G. Scott at the X?
I think you're going to see guys move around a little bit. And I think the interesting question then is that someone who is, like Jameson Williams has always seemed like a much more natural fit at Z than X for what Ohio State does. So, is that just they didn't really have a guy who they liked at X, who they trusted at X last year, and that's why that's where Jameson Williams was? Because it just never seemed like a really natural spot for him, to me, at least. So, which of the younger guys is, stepping up and ready to actually, take that next step? I mean, you've got that 2020 recruiting class was bananas. And just, for folks who don't remember, Mookie Cooper has transferred to Missouri. So Mookie Cooper's not there anymore, but you still have Julian Fleming, you still have G. Scott, you still have Jackson Smith-Njigba. And, none of those guys had enormous years last year. Smith-Njigba, 10 catches, 49 yards and a touchdown. And boy, howdy, do you remember that touchdown? Because that was, of all the touchdowns, that was maybe the most touchdown that there was. Julian Fleming, 7 catches, 74 yards, had, a bad drop or two that, these are the things that happen when you're a freshman that then you work through. And, G. Scott, did G. Scott have a reception last year? I don't think he did. No. Yeah, those guys are all people who I think we're probably expecting to take another step this year. And, how big is that step? Is it 1 step or 2 steps? I expect at least 1 to 2 of those guys to be in that 6-man rotation as a pretty regular figure this year. And then you've got the younger guys. You've got the Jayden Ballard, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka guys. The Marvin Harrison hype train has picked up steam pretty quickly inside the Woody Hayes. And, you've got 3 guys who are very, very talented players there. Ballard, I think, might take a year or 2 to develop, I think is sort of the consensus. But, it would not surprise me if one of those true freshmen worked their way into that rotation as well. So it'll just kind of be a matter of which of those guys makes that leap right away. And, they have shown like they are not shy about shuffling guys around. Garrett Wilson had an outstanding freshman year outside and they moved him inside last year. Like that's, if guys need to move, they will move guys. So that's not anything that they will view as something they can't do.
Yeah. That's why I'm not really trying to get hung up on who is an X type, because we were both pretty surprised when Garrett Wilson showed up there in 2019 and then, Jameson Williams there last year. I think last year it was just a matter of who are our 3 best guys. These are them. Okay. So this is where they'll be. And maybe the question is, are those still the 3 best guys? And I don't know I don't know that there's a reason to think that they aren't, unless you've seen big jumps from Fleming or Jackson Smith-Njigba. And both guys certainly played quite a bit last year and will continue to play more. I'd like to see that true 6-man rotation that they had in 2014, 2015, and that seemed to be in 2017, 2018 even. That's what they did. And it doesn't matter that Paris Campbell is really good. He's going to sit a couple of series or some snaps because KJ Hill is also playing that same position. I don't think it's terrible to have Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith-Njigba playing the same position because, you go tempo and you rotate. However, we've seen, as you said, some guys, sometimes Garrett Wilson's outside, sometimes he's inside, sometimes Chris Olave moves inside on some motion. Jackson Smith-Njigba, we saw him outside plenty. I go back to something I think I mentioned here with the Oklahoma or the Alabama receivers, where Devontae Smith was like a third of the time inside, and Jalen Waddle and John Mechie, like they're all, nobody is like 85% of the time or 95% of the time I'm outside. It's 2/3 is almost like the max of where they are compared to somewhere else. And so there's going to be some movement. I wonder, like ideally, in terms of body type, it would be Olave and Jamison Williams at Z, and then maybe Julian Fleming at G Scott, who are bigger guys, stronger guys at X. But I also think there's something to be said for having different body types at the same position. That way you're giving cornerbacks more to deal with, because dealing with Jamison Williams and G Scott is very different for one guy, from play to play. And I think that gives them an advantage that not a lot of teams around the nation can do, provided they do it, and provided that the guys have stepped up and are able to do that. I do expect all three of those 2020 guys to be ready this year and to force their way onto the field and to give the freedom of Hartline to pull Olave and Wilson. But man, that's going to be hard to take those two guys off the field.
It is hard to take those two guys off the field, just like it was hard to not throw the ball to those guys last year, which is why they completed 158 passes last year. 93 of them were to those two guys. That's one of those criticisms of Justin Fields is, well, he doesn't go through his progressions enough. Like, well, the first guy's open all the time. So, and then he always catches the ball when you throw it to him. So like, how much do you need to go through your progressions? I saw a stat, I think it was one of those like Pro Football Focus stats, where Chris Olave had at least one step of separation from his defensive back on like 70% of his snaps, which is ludicrous. Like, that's just stupid. So yeah, he's someone who is pretty much always open. Garrett Wilson, I think 2 years in, I think we have pretty much made our position on Garrett Wilson known. TLDR, he's pretty good. And, there is so much other talent in there that I feel like we're saying about literally every position. I'm super interested to see how this shakes out this spring, because there are so many different talented receivers in all different classes there. You've got the guys who've been around for a little while. You've got the guys who are, this is their first full year probably on campus. You've got the guys who this is their first year period on campus. Like this is a spot where it's a little bit unlike corner, where you do see true freshmen get on the field, not necessarily day one, but by October, there's a decent chance one of these true freshmen is on the field and contributing pretty regularly. I mean, last year, Jackson Smith-Njigba was playing like meaningful snaps in the national championship game. He had at least one reception in the semifinal game in like meaningful spot. This was not like garbage time. He was a regular contributor. Chris Olave, when Chris Olave, 2 years ago, it was Garrett Wilson who, you remember Garrett Wilson making huge plays in the college football playoff as a true freshman. 2 years ago, it was Chris Olave who was halfway through the year, no one knew his name, and then he had 2 touchdown catches in the first half against Michigan. Like, this is a spot where it's not realistic to expect young corners to get on the field. True freshman wide receivers, absolutely. If you are good enough, it is realistic to expect you to play and to start making an impact that year.
Yeah, and I think what Olave and Wilson didn't have was they were competing with like Benjamin Victor and Austin Mack, who both have gotten some sniffs from the NFL. Austin Mack is actually playing, but weren't elite guys. I think what Fleming and G. Scott Jackson Smith-Njigba had to deal with were trying to get snaps from Olave and Wilson, who are elite guys. Mm-hmm. And yet they still did it, because there was a time Julian Fleming was out there quite a bit as well. And I think some of it may have coincided with Chris Olave being out for a game, but there were still, like, they were out there, and I think that will continue. I do wonder, Tom, where you are on this. Chris Olave last year averaged 104 yards receiving per game. Garrett Wilson averaged 90 receiving yards per game. Do you see those numbers going down? For one, you've got a new starting quarterback, so maybe there's some issues there with the passing game. However, I think their snaps will go down, and so will that bring their yardage down? While I think both should really easily approach 1,000 yards, I could also I think maybe Garrett Wilson not so much 90 yards. He might stay right around there, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Chris Olave's numbers come down in terms of yards per game, simply because we need to get Julian Fleming some snaps, or we need to get this guy some snaps, and it doesn't need to be him all the time.
It doesn't need to be him all the time. And the other piece of this, which, I mean, you talked about the fact that when those guys were young, they weren't going against the same level of competition. The flip side of that coin is, when those guys were young, the transfer portal wasn't really a thing. So if you have guys who feel like, I came here, I was expecting to play my freshman year, and I've just been sitting on the bench and I haven't gotten to sniff the field really much, a whole lot. Like, you can have guys who will transfer after a year. I'm not saying any of these individual freshmen are the type of folks that would make that move, but it is certainly something you at least have to keep in mind when you're doling out playing time. If these guys are ready, you play them. That's how it is. And, these are talented enough players that we have seen the difference a talented true freshman wide receiver can make. Think back to Justin Ross in his true freshman year for Clemson. He didn't do a whole heck of a lot early in the year, and he still finished with 1,000 yards receiving as a true freshman, and was an absolute star in the playoff and the national championship game against Alabama in that year that they absolutely just walloped Alabama in the national championship game. So, there is no sense in sitting these guys and waiting. Like, this is not 1993 anymore. You don't have to sit and earn your stripes for 2 years. Like, if you are ready to play, and these guys, for any number of reasons, up to and including, hey, 7-on-7 camps have given them a ton more reps. They're coming in more prepared, the same way that we talk about quarterbacks coming in more prepared. You're coming in more prepared than the guys 20, 30 years ago did. You're playing for a national championship potentially every year. There's no reason, if these guys are ready to help, there's no reason to not let them help.
Let's talk about the freshmen. You mentioned them a little bit ago: Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jayden Ballard. With Harrison, he's an X. I mean, he's like 6'4" and 205, 210 pounds. That's just where you project him. He's the X type. With Ballard, who throughout high school looked like Devin Smith all over again, he's the Z type, although he keeps getting bigger and taller. So Egbuka is also 6'1", 190, something like that, would be more of the Z type, but also he could very easily be inside. He could very easily be X. I mean, with him, I think it's the other two are kind of easier to peg than Egbuka, which lends me to think maybe he has the easiest road to being either the seventh guy or maybe even a sixth guy, depending on what happens or if there are any injuries or maybe somebody doesn't develop. I think I'm just interested to see where they decide to put him at first and what their thought process is going into that. Why did you like him here? Why did you like him there? Or is this going to be one of those guys where we've talked about positionless football? Like, is there more of that coming? But they have to put him somewhere. I'm just interested to see where that will be initially.
My guess is he slots in inside at the H spot. And I guess we should probably define this for people who are going, the what, the who, the what. Okay, the X is kind of the big, tall possession receiver. That's kind of traditionally how they think about it at Ohio State. So that was like an Austin Mack played that position a little bit. But it's just kind of like the big guy, move the chains. If you're going to throw a fade, don't throw fades. But if you're going to throw a fade, you throw it to that guy because he's the kind of the big-bodied guy who can, who's 2.5 inches taller than the cornerback who's covering him. The H is kind of the short, shifty guy inside. That's Paris Campbell. That's Garrett Wilson last year. That's where Jackson Smith-Njigba probably slots in. And then the Z is, I mean, you mentioned his name earlier. Devin Smith is just the prototypical Z to me, where it's just like, okay, run a 9 route, go straight down the field, and then you run real fast, and I'm going to heave the ball down to you 50 yards down the field, and you're going to catch it, and it'll be a touchdown. Like, that's the Z. So it's kind of the big guy, the short shifty guy, the small shifty guy, and the fast downfield guy. Those are sort of traditionally how those roles typically sort out at Ohio State. So, I mean, to me, Egbuka, I think, probably starts at H. That, I think, is maybe the logical place to start him. That's also probably the toughest route to the field, because you do have those two really, really talented guys in front of you. But just in terms of his role and his build, that's where I would project him. But I mean, as you said, like, yeah, he could play X, he could play Z. Like, I mean, I'm sure, like, whenever we see, whenever we get to watch practice, knock on wood, whenever we get to watch practice this spring, we will see him working in one of those spots, and we will go, aha, this means something. And then the next practice that we don't get to watch, and the practice before that we didn't get to watch, he very well may have been working at those other spots. So, he's someone who's talented enough. I mean, this was a guy who was a top 10 overall player in the class of 2020, 5-star guy. He is someone who is talented enough that, I think they are going to be looking for opportunities to get him on the field early if he's ready. And, if you can slot in at any of 3 different receiver spots, like, yeah, that is going to give you an easier path to the field at a position where it is not going to be super easy to get on the field early.
And making it even more difficult for an inside guy or multiple inside guys to get on the field is, let's talk about the tight ends, because it is the second tight end that in the 12 personnel or whatever 1-2 personnel, or when you say 12 personnel, it's the first number is the number of running backs. The second number is the number of tight ends. So it could be 20 personnel, 2 tailbacks, no tight ends, 11 personnel, 1 tailback, and 1 tight end. They run a lot of 12 because they had 2 tight ends that they could rely on, and Jeremy Ruckert and Luke Farrell. And also, they didn't have as many inside guys that they could rely on in the past. When 2019, they just had KJ Hill, and that was about it. And then 2020, they got into that's what moved Garrett Wilson there, and then they had some Jackson Smith-Njigba. So, but that's where we saw a lot of Smith-Njigba outside, Garrett Wilson outside, because they wanted to continue to play those 2 tight ends. And when you play 2 tight ends, then that limits the number of receivers you can play, and it becomes this competition between that second tight end and the third receiver, whoever that receiver is. Whichever guy is better, that's the one who's going to see the field the most. And that's where this competition, the tight ends, and let's run through just the 4 scholarship tight ends that we're talking about: Jeremy Ruckert, Cade Stover, who is now a redshirt sophomore, Joe Royer, who is a redshirt freshman, Sam Hart, who is a true freshman. Those 4 guys, Stover, Royer, or Hart, those 3 guys will be competing to be that number 2 tight end, and then also essentially competing against that number 3 receiver to see who plays more. And right now, I like the receiver, that third receiver's chances a lot more than that second tight end.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a function of there's basically no proven depth behind Jeremy Ruckert. Jeremy Ruckert comes in and I think is probably someone who is going to be one of the best tight ends in the country and possibly one of the best tight ends in Ohio State football history this year. But Luke Farrell is one of the great underappreciated Ohio State players. Like, he's someone who was just so good for so long. And because he plays tight end at Ohio State, he never had the stats that made you go, oh, wow, look at that guy. But he was just so good and so reliable and did everything right for so long that, there's going to be a big drop off. And, Jake Hausman was not, I think he had 1 touchdown in his career, but he was someone who they could rely on, especially as a big run blocking tight end, to be just someone they could trust. If they don't feel like they have that second guy they can trust this year, and they may not, at least they may not right now, then there's so much depth at wide receiver. Like, why would you possibly take the third wide receiver off the field when you have, I think they probably feel much better about their top, 4 or 5, maybe 6 wide receivers than they do about their top 2 tight ends. So, and it's not like there's a real shortage of tailback talent that they're going to want to go empty set a bunch and you 3 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. Like I don't think they're going to see that either. So, it's interesting that this is Cade Stover's 3rd year. I mean, you said redshirt sophomore, and I'm like, that can't be right. And it's like, no, he's been around a minute. Now he started on defense and then moved to tight end before last season, and then had kind of a lost season because it was a weird shortened year. You didn't get a chance to play all the MAC games where you would get a chance to get on the field for an extended period. So it's his 3rd year, but he's still probably relatively early in his development cycle as a tight end. Same thing for Drew Royer. I mean, Sam Hart's coming in as a true freshman. Like I don't know that I would expect any of those guys to be like real significant game changers for them this year. But Ruckert, I mean, like I said, Ruckert, I think could be maybe the best tight end in the modern era of Ohio State football this year if things go the way that they could.
Because I'm a historian, what defines the modern era?
Let's say Ricky Dudley to the present.
Okay. All right. Well, that would be, you're saying he could be better than Ricky Dudley. And I think that's what you have to judge him based off of.
Mm-hmm.
Who ended up being, I think, the number 10 pick in the draft to the Raiders in the 1996 NFL draft. I would like to, when we talk to Kevin Wilson next, I would like for you to say, Kevin, I believe you have more confidence, or the team has more confidence in the top 6 receivers than in the top 2 tight ends. And just to see what he would say to you.
I think he would probably at least publicly disagree. And also, I don't think you're going to see a lot of 12 personnel. So I think we know that I'm actually probably correct.
Ooh, I would also like to hear your response, that exact response to him after his answer.
We don't usually get time to do follow-up, so I probably won't get a chance to say that. Ricky Dudley, just looking it up, 37 catches, 575 yards, 7 touchdowns as a senior at Ohio State in 1995. Now, I don't know if Ruckert reaches those numbers, but that's probably about the ceiling for him. That 37 catches would be a lot given how much other wide receiver talent there is on this team, because the other wide receivers on that team were Terry Glenn, who was super fantastic and amazing, and then it fell off to Buster Tillman and Demetrius Stanley, and it was just like that is a team where Terry Glenn was the leading receiver, and then Eddie George, and then Ricky Dudley. Catches? Yes, 47 catches, 417 yards. Yeah, and I mean that was a team that. The depth of the wide receiver unit on the 1995 Buckeyes was probably not quite as good as the depth of the team, the wide receiver unit on the 2021 Buckeyes. That is probably the least controversial thing I will say all year.
Check out the 2003 Ben Hartsock with like 33 catches or so, which maybe we'll ballpark the 33 to 37 to the over/under being 35 for Jeremy Ruckert, which seems ridiculously high when you talk about Ohio State tight ends, but Marcus Ball had 28, 26. He was in that range, so it's not outrageous for him to be in the 30s.
Well, and last year Ruckert, it was basically half a season. They played 8 games, which is just shy of half of a normal season, and he was the 3rd leading receiver on the team. 13 catches, 151 yards, 5 touchdowns in basically half a season. So you want to basically double those numbers. Okay, he's at 26 catches for basically 300 yards and 10 touchdowns. I mean, you're right up there at that point with the some of those best seasons. And let's see. Ben Hartsock, 33 catches, 290 yards, 2 touchdowns in 2003.
Yeah, the yardage is going to go. He's going to be above 10 yards a catch. That's without a doubt. I do wonder. I see him being the 3rd leading receiver for the Buckeyes this year. He was last year in a stilted season, but like I think he'll have more catches than Jameson Williams. And I think maybe Jackson Smith-Njigba, that might be a tough one. Those two competing, which is again, like I said, the receivers and the tight ends competing for playing time. I think those two guys might be battling for that 3rd receiver, but I still think because Ruckert will be out there 85% of the time or whatever, I see him being that 3rd leading receiver, and I see him. Again, I say 15 games, you say 12. I think in the 30s is. I don't think it's outrageous. We'll see. This is just a spring preview. This is not an actual seasonal preview. We'll do that in July or August.
I can't wait to forget everything that we've said about specific numbers here and say something completely different in 4 months. It's going to be fantastic.
Exactly. Cade Stover, Joe Royer, Sam Hart. What about Cormonte Hamilton moving back to offense from defense? We saw Rashawn Berry do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the history is there. Like, if they're not getting what they need from any of those guys, maybe they move Hamilton back. I wouldn't expect to see that considering how high they are in Royer and Sam Hart and of course Jeremy Ruckert. I don't know that you need we need a fourth guy that we can rely on or a third guy that we can rely on. You've got to get the most out of Cade Stover, Royer, and Hart. Like those are your guys that you have to work with and get the most out of and develop. You can't just, shoot, let's see what Cormonte is doing. That I don't think that's a viable strategy. I think you got to get those guys ready because you're going to need them. Oh gosh, next year.
I think you're overlooking the very obvious solution here. We talked about Ricky Dudley earlier. What's EJ Liddell doing in the fall? Nothing.
Man.
Move EJ Liddell over to the football team. That you want to talk about a mismatch? Go up and get it.
6'6", 6'7", 240. You put another 15 pounds on him. I think he's one of those guys where you look at the future like, sure, you may be playing some pro ball, but like David Lighty, like would have been, he was always one that, man, you put him at receiver, like 6'5", 6'6", and it can go and get it. But yeah, Ricky Dudley was a guy who did play basketball and was pretty good as well.
John Lumpkin too.
John Lumpkin.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some history there. I still think ultimately you throw like an 89 jersey on Dewan Jones. And
that's the solution for everything. Who's going to be the short yardage back? Dewan Jones. Who's going to be the short yardage tight end? Dewan Jones. Like, I don't ask much, but a tackle eligible pass to Dewan Jones, like that wowould probably break the no cheering in the press box rule for just about everyone on the beat if they threw a tackle eligible pass to Dewan Jones in the red zone.
How about this time? I was listening to the morning scoop this morning with Kirk Barton when he talking about Louis Arizari and how they Jim Tressel drew up a tight end around for him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking like a right tackle end around for Dewan Jones. It doesn't even have to be goal line. It could be either goal line because both are going to end up in 6.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what? If you've got jumbo athletes who are talented, if you're not using them if you're not giving them the ball, you're wasting them. That's how I see it.
Yeah, we never got to see our beautiful, beautiful dreams of a Robert Landers goal line touchdown come true. So really, I feel like Ryan Day owes it to us to make this happen for Dewan Jones.
Yeah, he does. Absolutely. So who leaves spring as the backup for you, Tom?
I think I'm going to go with Cade Stover just based on seniority and that's really basically all we can go on because I have not seen a whole heck of a lot of Cade Stover on the field during games. I don't know that we saw any of Joe Royer on the field during games last year. I mean, we're kind of going from scratch. So I think you just sort of default to seniority at that point. But, it would not shock me if it was Royer. I would be pretty surprised if it was Hart coming in and jumping 2 guys who were ahead of him. But I think Stover's probably the safest of the guesses.
All right, I'm just reading this for immediate release from Ohio State. Ohio State's football spring drills will be. I have to read this in my mind before I read something I shouldn't. We'll begin March 19th. April 17th is the date for the spring game. No details right now in terms of fan attendance perspective. Pro Day March 30th. So March 19th. That is is that a Friday? I believe it.
Let everyone sleep off a day to sleep off the St. Patrick's Day. Yes, 19th. Start on the 19th, and then
So you got 4 weeks of spring football. Just throw it all in there. All right, nice and compact. Gives me a couple extra days to finish up some preview stuff before spring football actually starts. Like trying to get it all done by Monday. Now I got that entire week to finish some stuff out, so that's good. I'm glad that we went on the show long enough to include this bit right here, rather than closing up the show and immediately saying, "Oh, this is when spring football starts."
See, this is how someone sent a text too early. This is you needed to wait. You needed to wait like 5 more minutes. That's you rushed the news out.
That's yeah. All right, so that's that. Tom, anything else? I agree with you. I think it's Cade Stover, who, again, we saw him last spring, boy, in that one practice, and he was making plays. He was catching the ball over the middle of the field, down the seam, looking like an athlete. So I think the potential is there clearly, or else they wouldn't have moved him. They would have cut him by now. So, yeah.
That's at Tony Gerdeman, G-E-R.
So, anything else, Tom, before we go?
No, I think we've talked enough about
we sure
wide
have.
receivers. I don't know if we've said the phrase "year of the tight end" quite often enough, but we've got a lot of shows between now and the end of the year of the tight end. We've got 10 more months.
This is the year of the tight end, where we will talk about it much more than we did today. Jeremy Ruckert, upwards of 60 catches. That's what I'm thinking in his career. Yeah, it's going to be a big year for him. Tom, over under Jeremy Ruckert touchdowns this year. Yeah. I want to go 10.5 because 9.5 seems too low. I'll go 9.5.
Under.
Okay.
I'll go under. I think you have enough, they have enough running back talent. You've got enough wide receiver talent that he can have another 7 touchdown season and it would be a fantastic season. I mean, like a fantastic season. And I think he is someone who you'll see teams keying on a little bit more this year. Because you don't, there isn't a second tight end, so it's going to be like that's the guy who gets your best tight end defender. Not that hasn't been the case in previous years, but I think he's going to have a pretty good year. But yeah, I mean, 10 touchdowns as a tight end would be, if he does it, fantastic. You can be the best tight end in the last 30 years of Ohio State football without scoring 10 touchdowns. So that's pretty good.
The interesting thing will be because he's going to have 1 or 2 games where he gets multiple touchdowns. And so half of that come in 2 games. And then over the next, again, I say 15 games. So over the next 13 games, can he have 5 touchdowns or 6 touchdowns? And that, I think so. You think, of course, not. Which
you got to remember, there's only 10 more games for me. So it's
exactly. Plus, I truly believe this is the year of the tight end. You're just saying it. I believe it in my heart. You're just going through the motions.
The great pumpkin's going to come this time. I just know it.
So I'm looking forward to it. All right, that'll do it. Tom, who you got on the mornings? No, I won't even ask because I already know. You don't know yet.
In TV, the word is efforting. So we're waiting to hear back from someone who is planning. I'm planning to have on, but I don't want to jinx anything just yet. We'll see. We'll see if it comes together, and if not, we'll have someone else on, and you'll never know.
You know who you should try? Ty Tucker, the men's tennis coach.
I will have Ty Tucker on at some point as well. I covered the men's tennis match over the weekend. That was
that's why I suggested it. I'm sure that'll be a good get.
That is a very however good you are at your job, Ty Tucker is better at his job than you are. So they are I counted this up at one point. It's like 152-1 now, and their last 153 Big Ten regular season matches. Just rename the, you know how the Big Ten renames all the trophies, the Griffin Breeze, MVP,
Greasy Breeze.
Greasy Breeze. Yeah. It should just, which is like downwind from a McDonald's. Can we rename that trophy, please? Yeah. It should just be the Tucker Big Ten championship trophy because no one else gets to hold this. He does not share.
All right. That'll do it. That's good. I will look forward to listening to that one. I do look forward to listening to that one, and I will also look forward to listening to that one down the road because present and future. Tom, I think that'll do it then for this show. We've gone on for a while now. Thursday, we will look at the secondary, preview the secondary, and whatever else happens between now and then, we will also talk about so that we don't forget to keep you up with current events because we know that's what we do here. We keep you guys current because we don't need you on the internet. It's just a cesspool. So remember, BuckeyeScoop.com. If you're not yet a member, you should become a member. Check out the Ask the Insiders board. As Tom mentioned on the Morning Scoop today, a ton of stuff. Nevada Buck has been killing it lately with a bunch of insider stuff, expansion, TV stuff, and we're just getting started. So if you're not yet a member, I suggest you try it out. Just try it for a month. You'll see. You'll like it. I promise. And I'm not a liar. So, although Tom, is it really a lie if you promise something, but you have no say in whether or not like they enjoy something.
I don't think that's a lie. Here's what I'll say.
Uh-huh.
We have every time we tweet, hey, you should give a member. There's a whole bunch of people who are in our mention, in the mentions on Twitter saying, yeah, you should absolutely do this. This is amazing. It's incredible. You don't see a lot of, yeah, this is actually terrible. Like, no, why would you do that? It is a fun, really fun community. Ton of people writing really, really interesting stuff. Bill Green, Mark Givler, Alex Gleitman have all dropped really, really interesting in recruiting stuff and insightful stuff on some things that were happening inside the program last year and some things that are coming in the future for the Big Ten and as far as what this fall season may look like in the Big Ten. Lots of really interesting stuff. Plus, plus Nevada Buck, as you said, and and you and I are there, so that's fine too.
But Tom, you mentioned like people aren't like saying, "Oh, blah blah blah, I don't like it." Is there really a lot of people criticizing stuff on the internet?
Yeah, people on the internet don't like to complain, so it really is not a fair thing. I mean,
Right.
Think about how many things you've seen that someone has not been complaining about. You don't see people complaining about Buckeye Scoop. It is literally the only good thing on the internet. So if you're not a member, you're missing out.
All right. So that's a great, solid job, Tom. So thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you guys on Thursday.